Okay, we are holding, just on Daf, this would be Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Sheni, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. Okay, hope you could see it. Okay. Ama Rabba Baba Chana, Ama Rab Shmuel Bar Marsa, Ama Rav. So Rabba Baba Chana said in the name of Rav Shmuel, who said in the name of Rav, Mishum, this in the name of, Rav said it in the name of Rabbi Yossi Ish Haitzel. Rabbi Yossi, the man, the main Gadol Hadar who lived in Haitzel. Okay, so this is Rabbi Yossi, and Rav is saying it in the name of Rabbi Yossi. Menayin, how do I know? She'ein she'alam b'chaldiyim. How do I know a person's not allowed to seek out an astrologer, a stargazer, and the stargazers could give you some indication of how the future is going to turn out. So basically, you just want to know the end of the game before it ever happens. So you're not allowed to do that. How do you know that? Shenama, because it says in the pasuk, Tamim tia im Hashem alekecha. There, you have to be complete with the God. You have to be tamimistic. In other words, you have to be confident that everything works out for the best. That's what Rashi says. Tamim tia, like the Rashbam, lias beteach bo. You have to have calmness. B'chol kairis v'nolos. Anything that's going to happen, anything that's going to come into the future, habayis lecha. So you're ready to accept everything, and you'll accept it with calmness and not nervous about what the future is going to look like. There are places there in Queens that where the Indians live, every other block is another psych reader.
There's one on Central Avenue.
There's
not
one
on Central.
Rockaway.
On Rockaway.
I know.
I cannot believe it's still in business.
And must pay the rent, right? So, but I know where I work, not far, is like in a very Indian area, and you just drive down, let's say Liberty Avenue. Every other block has one or two of them, so they compete with each other. Anyway, how do you know that if somebody is greater than you in one thing, he has one thing better than you, he knows how to do one thing, you have to show him respect. Shenama, it is a remez for it. Kol kava durach ruach yaterebe. It says by Daniel that the king saw that he had one thing better than him. Malka asis, and then he thought it over. Lahakamise al kol mechusa, to put Daniel in charge of his whole kingdom. It's a remez pasuk, doesn't exactly fit in. I mean, but it's Daniel. But anyway, it's just a way to remember it. That in Tanakh you'll find that if you know your friend has one thing better than you, you have to show him respect. And then another statement from this Rabbi Yossi Ish Hoitzel is Sheves al dam tahar ashur l'shamish. A woman, as you know, after she gives birth 7 days later, let's say if it was for a male, she goes to the mikvah, right? She could be with her husband. And the fascinating thing about that time that she could be with her husband is that even if she would see blood again, she could still be with her husband, according to Minat Torah, because that's called dam toyer. Any blood that comes out of her during that 33-day period after the first 7 days is considered dam toyer, and she could have tashmish. Then she starts her cycle again, where the dam that will come out will become tameh after 40 days. But she should have a hefsek on the 40th night not to be with her husband. So that night she'll know now is a new type of counting that's going to come, that if I see blood from here on in, it becomes tameh. Unlike the blood that I saw during the 33 days prior was tahar. So we tell her that she's not allowed to have relations with her husband for a period of time. At kama amarav at oina. That night. So let's say the 39th day ends during the daytime. That night she shouldn't have tashmish, and the next day she's back permitted to her husband. Anyway, those are the three things that Rabbi Yossi Ish Hutzel said, and we don't find them so much. So Tana, we learned in the Brisa, who Yosef Ish Hutzel. The same Yossi Ish Hutzel had another couple of names. He's known as Yosef Abavli. He's also known as Isi ben Gur Aryeh. For some reason, he's known as Isi, the son of Gur Aryeh. maybe his father's name was Gur Aryeh, so or Aryeh. And you see Yosef and Isi is a play. Isi is a play on the name of Yosef. Who Isi ben Yehuda is known as Isi, the son of Yehuda, Isi ben Gamliel. All right, who Isi ben Mahalal. So he had a number, his father seemed to have a number of different names. Mahalal, Gamliel, Yehuda, Gur Aryeh. His name changes from Yosef to Isi, but it's all the same person if you find him throughout Shas. Umashmoy, what is his real name? Isi ben Akavia Shmoy. His name was Isi ben Akavia. So I don't know, for some reason, maybe his father had to start a lot of businesses and kept changing his name. I don't know. I'm just saying, but the Chazal tell us that he had, if you find him in Shas, it comes under different names. Who the Gemara says also, who Rabbi Yitzchak ben Tavla, who Rabbi Yitzchak ben Chakla, who Rabbi Yitzchak ben Eloi. All these people the same name. Rabbi Yitzchak stayed the same, but his father was sometimes known as Tavla, sometimes it's Chakla, and sometimes it was known as Ella. Now a new Gemara. This has nothing to do with what before. Whenever you see in the Gemara that Rabbi Yitzchak, if it's a statement in halacha, it's Rabbi Yitzchak ben Atzcha, the Shmatza. If it's a statement in teachings of halacha, you should know it's Rabbi Yitzchak ben Acha. And you skip the word who. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas d'Agarta. Whenever you're seeing a statement in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, when it concerns Agaric Gemaras, it's known as Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas. So sometimes in the Agadah Gemaras, you see Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. So that means it was Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas. If it's a statement in halacha, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, then you know it's Rabbi Yitzchak ben Acha. And there's Simonech means Shimonu Achai v'Reyai. When it comes to the way to remember, if it's a teaching in halacha, it has to do with Yitzchak ben Acha. The Gemara continues. I love that this Gemara is very appropriate. The following Gemara is very appropriate for Pesach, for people who overspend on something, maybe a program, I don't know, for what they don't really can afford. The Gemara says 3 lines from the top. Ama Rabba Bachanan, Rabbi Yochanan, Mishmeid Rabbi Yehuda ben Eloi. Rabba Babachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Yehuda ben Eloi. Very fascinating Gemara. Echel botzo, eat onions. That means cheap food. V'shei betzel, and sit in the shade. In other words, you can sit in your own home and be comfortable, eat what you can afford. Don't eat geese and chickens. And your heart should constantly run after it, because you're gonna get used to eating it, and you're gonna have a taiva for it, and you won't be able to be without it. So just get used to eating more minimalistic foods, so you don't have you're not hooked on anything. In our parlance, it would mean like eat less sugar, so you don't have that drive for it. Now here he says, don't eat less food and drink. What should you do with the money? And add on to your home. Build a nice kitchen or nicer library or something like that. Spend less on food and drink and simchas. You could overspend on that, and just invest the money in your own house. Very sound advice. Ula said, when he came from Eretz Yisrael, he said like this: Maslim b'maravin. When I learned in Israel, they used to give a mashal. The ochla alisa, if you're used to eating the tail of an animal, tashiba aliyasa, then you're going to live on top of the roof, because you're going to, in other words, you're going to always try to hide from your creditors. In order to eat, in bistro grill every night, you have to borrow a lot or spend more than you have. So therefore, you're going to live in the attic, so no one can find you. The creditors are going to ring the doorbell, and you're not home. The achel kakule, but if you eat vegetables, akikle demasashachav, you could sit on the garbage heap. You could sit on a park bench on Central, and nobody can bother you because you don't owe anybody money. Fascinating Gemara to remember. And the Gemara brings this in because people tend to overspend for Yom Tov, probably, and that's how it ends up in Arvei Pesachim. Now we return to the Pesach Seder. Mozgalai Kais Rishon, they pour you the first cup of Kiddush, that's Kadesh, and you really should have your children pour you the wine, not that you should pour it yourself, because the Mishnah says, Mozgalai, they dilute it for him. We don't dilute our wines, but they dilute it for the master of the house. And the master of the house makes Kiddush, but I think most people's custom is that, my custom is that everybody on the table makes Kiddush, including my wife.
Everybody says it at the same time.
Everybody says it at the same time, but there are places that it's just the master of the house says the Kiddush, and everybody drinks. Beis Shammai says this is the order of Kiddush. First, you make the bracha on the Kiddush day. You know, and then you end off. Then you make the Bar Bria Gafen. Not like what we do. We do like what Beis Hillel says. First, you make the bracha over Bar Bria Gafen, and then you make the bracha over the blessing of the day. Okay. Then you make the Asher Bacha Bana. So you make the Bar Priya Gafen first. So what is this machlekes all about? So we had this once before, Masechta Brachas. Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. The following are items that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had a machlekes regarding a Suda Shabbos. But the same thing applies by Sudas Yantiv. Beis Shammai says, you first make the bracha on the day, and then you make the bracha on the wine. Now, why is that? He gives you two reasons. One, the first reason is because the Shabbos or the Yantif causes you to bring out make Kiddush. Normally, a person doesn't drink wine at supper. But because it's a Shabbos day, that's why you're bringing the wine. So what is more important? The wine, the day bracha, Asher Bacha Banu, or Asher Kiddushanim B'Tzoyis V'Ratzavanu. That's why you should make that bracha first. And then you make the bracha on the wine, Bari Priya Gafim. And the second reason is, already Shabbos starts already in shul. Yontif starts already in shul when it turns dark, and then comes Kiddush. Then you go sit down to meal. So first came the day, and then came the chiyuv to drink it, to mention the day over wine. So therefore, you make the bracha first on the day, and then you make the bracha on the wine. Beis Hillel is the opposite. First you make the Bar Priya Gafen, and then you make the bracha on the day. He also gives two reasons. Why? The wine causes the Kiddush to be said. In other words, if you don't have wine or bread, you're not going to say Kiddush. If you have no food in the house, God forbid, so then you don't make Kiddush. That's it. So therefore, what gives you the requirement to say Kiddush? The fact that you have wine on the table. So that's why you should make the Bar Priya Gafen first and then say the Kiddush. Davar Acher, another reason, the Beis Hillel says, Birchas Hayayin Tadira. The most of your brachas that have to do with Kedusha, like Birchas HaMazon and Sheva brachas and all these things, you always make it over a cup of wine. So that comes more often. And the blessing of the day is not so often. The Shabbos comes once a week. The Yontif comes once a week. So Tadir, a bracha that comes often, versus Veshe'ena Tadir, a bracha that does not come so often. Tadir Kaidim, you should make the bracha that comes more often first. So we have a machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, what the nusach of the Kiddush should look like. So the Gemara concludes, the Hilkasa Kedivrei Beis Hillel. The halacha is like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says, "My davar acha." Why do you have to say? Why did Beis Hillel give two reasons? Even with one reason, it's good enough. So chitema. Do you want to say? So the answer is chitema. Would you say that Beis Shammai really has two reasons? Hasam tarte. Beis Shammai over there had two reasons. And I only have one reason. So the Gemara says, I also have two reasons. Beis Hillel says, I also have two reasons. If you have a conflict between an often bracha and something that's not often, you should give the often one kedima precedence. Now, the Brisa ended off the halacha kedivrei Beis Hillel, as if it's a chiddush that we should paskin like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious that you paskin like Beis Hillel. There was a voice from heaven that came out somewhere and told all the rabbis to paskin like Beis Hillel. So once that Paschal was very well known, a voice from heaven, so I don't need the Brisa to repeat, to say it, Hilkas Kedivrei Beis Hillel, that's all over Shas, you paskin like Beis Hillel. What is the novelty of that? So the Gemara says, if you want, I can tell you that our Brisa was written Koidem Paschal. This whole Brisa of Tanur Rabbanan, right? This whole Brisa was written way before the Paschal came out. So that's why that Brisa had to specifically say Halacha Kebeis Hillel. If you want, I can tell you La'achar Paschal. That Brisa is even after the Paschal came out. So what is the Brisa telling you that the Halacha is like Beis Hillel? Rabbi Yeshua, there's an opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, the Amar, who said, across the board, even if God says something, we don't necessarily pay attention to it. Regarding a halachic matter, the Amar Rabbi Yeshua said, "Ein mashkichim b'baskol." We don't pay attention in a baskol. In other words, even if a voice from heaven says the halacha is like so and so, we have to have our own opinion here. And if we disagree with God, so be it. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, it does not matter if the voice of heaven said the halacha is kebesil. You have to tell me the halacha is like. Okay, so the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So that's this brisa over here. I will tell you that Rabbi Yeshua had a disagreement with Rabbi Lezer in Masechta Kelim, and Rabbi Lezer was so adamant that he was right that he caused the voice from heaven to come down and say the halacha is like me. And Rabbi Yeshua responded that we never pay attention to Baskal. And in fact, they put Rabbi Lezer in Cherem because most of the rabbis agreed with Rabbi Yeshua and did not paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. And this famous Rabbi Lezer who died in Cherem. Anyway, next Mishnah. This Mishnah talks about karpas. Now, this Mishnah is an odd Mishnah because we know that for karpas, I think I take potatoes, but I hear some people take carrots for the karpas and some people take celery. It's very flexible, the karpas. But this Mishnah is discussing somebody who has no other vegetable. He only has romaine lettuce, the kind that you use for maror. So the Mishnah says, Heviu lefonav, if they brought before him romaine lettuce, which technically can be used for maror, but still they have to bring it to him for karpas, and he should eat, like less than a kazayas or something like that, like we do. And mitabel bechazeres, and he should make sure you dip the romaine lettuce into something. We dip our romaine lettuce into charosis, but you could dip it, if it's karpas, we dip it into salt water. And that's what if you see over here, the Rabbeinu Tam says that we dip karpas into salt water. As you know, the point of the karpas is to inspire the kids to get their mind thinking in a question form, to be more inquisitive and ask questions. So that's why we do the karpas. So the Mishnah is saying, if b'di'evid you don't have another vegetable, use your romaine lettuce as your karpas vegetable, but make sure you dip it, because dipping it is important. And that will inspire the kid to ask, because normally you don't eat a vegetable before you wash for the meal. Yes, you do eat vegetables. A common thing is to eat vegetables so you'll have a bigger appetite when you finally eat the main course. But prior to starting the meal, you don't eat vegetables. And that's what makes the child ask. And the Mishnah says, Ad shemagia lepaperes apas. That means that that's prior. Ad means prior to you're going to actually use the chazeres again after the bread. The bread here refers to matzah. You're going to use the chazeres again. You're going to use the maror again as the vegetable that makes you want to eat more of the main course. And that will be actually the mitzvah of mar that takes the place of the normal vegetable plate that you have prior to your appetizer. So that's prior to the maror that is used as the appetite for the after you wash over the matzah. Very strange language of the Mishnah and very strange case of the Mishnah. But the Gemara is going to discuss it. Then you finish your karpas. Hevi lefonav, they brought before the man matzah, v'chazeres, v'charosis. They brought the matzah, the chazeres. Again, they brought him again on the seder plate. They brought him a maror, like romaine lettuce, charoses. That's the mixture with the nuts and the apples and the vinegar, wine, ushnei tavshilin, and 2 cooked foods. The Mishnah doesn't discuss what those 2 cooked foods are. Afal pisha ein charosis mitzvah. Then the Mishnah adds, charosis is not a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to have this mixture. It's done for a particular reason. Why we have it. The Gemara is going to discuss what if it's not a mitzvah, why put it on the seder plate? Rabbi Lazar ben Tzadok omer mitzvah. It is a mitzvah. It happens to be a mitzvah to bring charosis. And then for the Haggadah, besides the seder plate, Bamigdash, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, the whole body of that animal, probably on a spit, stood in the middle of your table, and you're whiffing away as you're saying the Haggadah Shal Pesach. That was the way of the Mishnah. I will point out to you that the Seder plate is very interesting in the sense that there are two Seder plate. There are two ways, versions of how the Seder plate looks. Most people have it this way: the Zureya, the Beitza on the top, which represents the carbon Pesach, the carbon Chagiga that you had, that was brought on Erev Pesach. Then you have Mora, Karpas, and salt water and the Charoisis. But a lot of people have it this way. It's the Arizal's way to say it. But I want to point out what's important over here to notice is that the reason why they put the Karpas down over here and the Mora a little higher, because they don't want you to stick your hand passing the Mora to go to the Karpas. There's a concept called Ein Mavirin ala mitzvahs. You're not allowed to pass over mitzvahs. If you come across a mitzvah, you have to do it right away. So therefore, they put the karpas right in front of you, so you don't have to stick your hand over the maror. Basically, it's like your tefillin. If you noticed, some people have the minig to put the shel roish on the right side. If your hand enters on the right side, in order not to pass in order not to pass the shel roish to get to your shel yad, you open the tefillin so that you could right away reach for the shel yad, because passing over a mitzvah and not doing it is something called ein mavirin ala mitzvah. Then you have the Mar and the Choraisin Zroim Beitzi, you're not going to use that night. Okay, next mission. You see, in the Arizal's way to do it, you have that problem because you're passing over the chazeres. You see, in the Arizal's way, we have two types of moros. Some people have the horseradish over here and the romaine lettuce over here. The horseradish is used for the koirach, but in order to get to your karpas, you're going to have to cross your hands to the karpas, and you're going to be marvel on the mitzvah of morer. So, but nevertheless, because al pi Kabbalah, the Arizal felt that this is the better setup for the Seder plate. Again, you have to know what your minig was. Okay. Another few more minutes. Amar Shlakish. Rab Shlashka said, the fact that you ate the mora, the fact that you ate romaine lettuce for your karpas, and you were not yoitza the mitzvah of mora. So Amar Shlakish, Rab Shlaka says, Zoyse Meres, our Mishnah proves mitzvah strichas kavana. In order to be yoitza mitzvah, you have to have the intention to do that mitzvah. You have to say, I'm right now going to do the mitzvah of mora, because the Mishnah proves it. Because the reason is, the Mishnah says that you're going to make the morer later on. So you weren't going to the morer with karpas, although you're eating romaine lettuce. And that's what the Rosh Hashanah says. You're not eating it when you want to eat the morer. At the time that you're eating the karpas, it's not morer time. So you stop eating it as a vegetable. And probably, most likely, you're not having kavana by the karpas to be yaitz the mitzvah of morer. Therefore, you have to bring it back again. Hilkach, you have to bring it back again. That's why the Mishnah says bring it back after you wash for shemar, because when you use that romaine lettuce for karpas, you were not yaitz. So that proves it. Why weren't you yaitz? But you ate morer. The answer is when you were eating the karpas, you weren't eating it the shem morer. You were eating it because it's a vegetable to cause the kids to ask. If you want to say that mitzvah do not need kavana, why do you have to eat the mora again after you wash after the matzah? You already ate the mora by the karpa, so you yaitza once. Why do you have to eat mora again? So the Gemara says, "Mimai, how do you know?" Dilma, I could tell you yaitza the mora by the karpas. The reason why you have to eat it again is because to make the kids ask. It's like you're doing strange things to make the kids ask. That's the Gemara's proof that maybe the Mishnah doesn't agree with that concept. Mitzvah strichas kavana. Dilma loyal mitzvahs ain't strichas kavana. I'll tell you, mitzvahs do not need kavana. But why do I have to dip twice? You were yaitza the mara. You were yaitza the mara by the karpas. You yaitza your mitzvah mara by karpas, but you have to eat mara again after you wash on a matzah, not because you're being yaitza mara. But so the children should ask. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, if that's what our Mishnah says, that you're yaitzu your morer because the first time you ate the lettuce, and the second time you're eating the lettuce so that the children should ask. So why doesn't the Mishnah say, let the Mishnah say that you ate, if that's the case, why does the Mishnah say that you're eating the romaine lettuce again after the hamaitzi matzah? You could eat any vegetable. You can eat carrots after you wash. So the Gemara says, if it would say that you're eating, let's say, carrots after you wash, I would think, Havamina, then it would make sense to dip it twice, because the first time you dip the romaine lettuce, the second time you're dipping carrots, so fine, that would make sense. But if a person only has one vegetable, I might think, you don't need to dip twice. So the Mishnah teaches you that even if you're using romaine lettuce, you still need to dip twice. The first time you're going to dip, even without kavana, you're going to be yotze the mitzvah of mara. You automatically, as soon as you swallow it, you're yotze the mitzvah of mara. The second time, after you're going to eat, is kehechet lehevebe akayr l'tinoikis. The second time, what we call as mara, will be used as a way to get the kids to ask. So you don't really have a proof from our mitzvah, our Mishnah, that mitzvahs tzrichas kavana. Mishnah could be holding mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana and still need to dip twice. Now, B'oi, Tanya, I'll prove it to you that mitzvahs do not need kavana. You yotze the mitzvah even without thinking about it, because achlan demai, if you eat the maror as demai, whatever, demai is a type of, we're not sure, you bought it from an amaretz, yotze, you fulfilled your obligation of maror. But achlan, if you eat the maror, here's the question: if you eat the maror b'loy miskavim without thinking about the mitzvah, yotze, you yotze. See it. Achlan chatzoin. If you ate the half a kazayas of maror and then 5 minutes later you eat another half a kazayas, yotze. You fulfilled your obligation. Make sure that there's not a delay between one half a zayas and the other half a zayas more than about, let's say, 9 minutes. But the bottom line is, but if you eat it in a certain time span, you're yotze, even if you eat it piecemeal. Nevertheless, the Brisa says, achlam b'loy miskavin, if you eat the maror without having any intention, as long as you swallow romaine lettuce, yotze, you're yotze. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll grant you that. There is Tanoim that hold mitzvahs don't need kavana, but there is a Tana that holds that mitzvah does need kavana. Tanoihi, it's a machlekes Tanoim. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yossi says, "Afal pi shetiba b'chazeres," even though you did do the used karpas, use romaine lettuce for your karpas. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. Even though you use romaine lettuce for your karpas, yeah, mitzvah. This is the key word. Mitzvah. You have to bring it again for the mitzvah of Mora. You have to bring the Mora again after you wash. You have to bring it on the Seder plate, and you're going to use it again after you wash. So the Gemara says, Vakate, it's still, what's your proof? Mimai. How do you know Rabbi Yossi holds you have to, your mitzvahs strichas kavana? Dilmak sava Rabbi Yossi, mitzvahs ain't strichas kavana. Maybe Rabbi Yossi is like our Mishnah. Mitzvahs do not need kavana. Why did Rabbi Yossi say you have to bring the romaine lettuce again? So that the tinokes should know that that the tinokes should ask a question. So maybe Rabbi Yossi is aligned with our Mishnah. Really, the karpas if you use romaine lettuce as your karpas, you yotze maror, done. Why do you have to have romaine lettuce again after you wash? So it's another dip. So the kid should ask. But really, I can tell you that even if without thinking about a mitzvah, you yotze the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, no, it came my mitzvah. Why would Rabbi Yossi say the word mitzvah to bring it again? From that word that he said mitzvah, it's mashma that the real mitzvah of maror is after you wash. The fact that you ate romaine lettuce for your karpas and you had no intention that it should be for the mitzvah of maror, therefore, you will never yotze the mitzvah of maror. That's why the mitzvah really occurs after you're going to wash, when you're going to bring the romaine and eat the romaine lettuce again. So this ends the sugya, very, very important sugya, is that for a mitzvah, if you're not thinking about what you're doing, let's say a mitzvah of Hanukkah neiros, you're not thinking and you lit it. You lit the menorah, it was dark in the room and you lit it. are you yotzei the mitzvah of Hanukkah? You didn't have any intention, but the fact is you did the maaseh mitzvah. So that is the machlokes in the Gemara, and it seems that there is an opinion that holds mitzvahs tzrichas kavana. We hold that by a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, it mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana. So that's why our hakpada is not to use for karpas romaine lettuce, because we hold mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana. As you see, that the Gemara goes there, and therefore, if you use romaine lettuce as your karpas, that means you yotzei the mitzvah of maror. So we don't want that to happen. We want you to first eat matzah and then eat maror. So that's why it's very flexible, but there are different opinions what to use. I saw that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. I mentioned some people use celery, some people use potatoes. He used cucumbers. And he had a problem with celery because in his time in Israel, the celeries had a lot of bugs in them. Let's learn one more minute. Gemara says, "My shnei tavshilin." What are the two cooked foods on your seder plate? Amar Rav Huna said, "Silka v'ariza." Beets and oriz is rice. You put a little rice. Rava Rava would make sure to have a silka v'ariza on. He would have beets and rice. Now, hoyel v'nafet mepumid Rav Huna. Since Rav Huna said that it's good enough to have beets and rice, he would put rice and beets on the seder plate. This is before the gezer of kitnius. Like we don't have rice, or at least Ashkenazim don't. But the oriz was permitted to be eaten. Amar Rav Ashi says, "Shmami no the Rav Huna less la the chayish lahad Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri." The fact Rav Huna allowed to put rice on your seder plate, it seems that he doesn't hold over Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri holds that rice is almost like a sixth grain. It's like wheat. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri oiris min dagenhu. It's like wheat. If it becomes chametz, cooked rice, it's kares. It's like chametz. You can have rice matzah and it'll be good for Pesach. The fact that Rav Huna said that it could be put on the seder plate, he holds rice can never become chametz, like we hold. It can never become chametz. And technically, had it not been for the gzeira of kitnius, we would be eating rice. I think the Svardim could eat rice on Pesach. Then the final Gemara says, Chizkiya says, afilu dog ubeya asha olav. Even if you use fish with the egg on top of it, it looks like one food. But if a piece of fish with an egg on top of it is also considered two tafshilim for your seder plate. Rav Yosef says, shnei bide basa. You took two pieces of meat. Echad zeichel Pesach, one's the zeichel Pesach. Ve'echad zeichel chagiga, one's for the chagiga. Ravina Ama, and finally, afilat garma u beshula, the meat and its and the meat juice, the juice that comes out of it, that's considered like two foods. But our custom again is to take the shank bone, cook it, to roast it, and the egg. And what's not also well known is, first of all, we take one of them, we roast it, but we don't eat it. But it's not good to throw it out. The Chayei Adam in the Shulchan Aruch, it's written that what people do, it's a little shank bone and it's a little egg, but when the Seder's over, you throw it out. No, it should be eaten because it was used for a mitzvah. Also, it's a bizayin oichel, and it's a bizayin for a mitzvah. So if you can, try to eat that shank bone the next day, not at night, because we don't eat roasted meat at night. And of course, the egg for later on.
Assuming you didn't leave your Seder plate out for 2 days.
No, what he writes is that you should use it for 2 days.
Right, but if you don't put it away and it's sitting out from Erev Seder through the end of the second day of Yontif.
Right, so then
you can't have meat or an egg like that out.
No, you put it in the refrigerator. But he was talking about talking about where people were, after it's finished, they would throw it in the garbage. And he said that's like a bezoyin mitzvah. It's like taking your lulav after the day after Sukkot and throwing it in the garbage. It's a mitzvah. So at the very least, for the bezoyin of the mitzvah and bezoyin of oichlin, you should eat it. I'm going to talk about this is an important taisvis. We'll mention it tomorrow when we continue with this sugya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.